So, your FPS is dipping. You don't know what's going on, and your colors look way off in games like Warzone here. Well, today, guys, I'm going to give you guys my guide of what's the best in-game Warzone settings and what is the best color settings for NVIDIA and AMD today. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper than usual guides here. So mainly people talk about how you should change the setting to this, but they never explain why. For example, NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency. Do you know what that does? Have you watched a video that actually explained what that does? I think there's one or two out there, but there's not a ton of videos out there that give you guys the information that you guys deserve, and we're going to do that today. My name is Kirneill from Sense Quality, and we are going to be giving you guys more frames, giving you guys a better looking game and a better experience in general, so you guys can win those extra 1% of gunfights that you guys aren't supposed to lose here. So let's get into it. So the first thing that we're going to get into is the color settings. So before anything, let's change our color settings, because that's going to be the easiest thing to change here. So before most people go right away in Windows to change their color settings. Don't do that, guys. The first thing that you should do to change your color settings is actually start with your monitor. Because when you start with your monitor, you find what's right for you, and then you fine tune what's in game. Most people do it backwards, and that's why the game doesn't look good for them. But professional players that we've worked with, they tend to do the monitor first, the in-game second. So for example, for our color settings that we're about to provide you guys, we like that the monitor is at 100% brightness. Now you could adjust it the way you want, but 100% is usually the way to go for gaming if you're trying to see as much as possible. So as soon as you did adjust your monitor to the brightness that you would like, I would go to the NVIDIA Control Panel, and AMD, fellas, give me 1 second. You guys can do the exact same thing. All of these settings are in AMD. They are named the exact same thing. It just will not be the same numbers. You just have to fine tune this to what you would like. And we're going to explain how each one affects your game here. So hold on for a minute. NVIDIA Control Panel, AMD Radeon settings. These are the two main places that you should be getting your color settings from. If you are using NVIDIA filters, you are increasing your latency and you are decreasing your performance when you could just do it in NVIDIA Control Panel. So let's get into it. How to use NVIDIA Control Panel. So you would go to adjust desktop color settings. Then on your monitor, so I have a monitor and Elgato that you could see here. On your monitor, what you're going to do is you're going to click on the monitor, and you're going to start with brightness after you finish your monitor brightness. And you're going to set it to what you would like your brightness to be. That's really personal preference. It's just a matter of how high you want it to be. I don't like it too high because it makes it a little grainy and hard to see. So I just set it to like 50 to 52. Now, contrast. What does contrast do? And what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to actually put the game in Windows mode so you guys can actually see what the difference is when we make the changes to the settings here. So what does contrast do? Contrast basically allows you to see enemies or objects better from another enemy or object. That's how I think about it. It adds a little bit of shadows, but it actually improves your ability to detect or spot enemies from like farther distances and stuff like that. So with contrast, I like to put that at 80 for this update. Now, it might be different on different monitors. You could set it to what you want to, but this is just for my personal monitor, which is an Alienware AW2721D. Now, we're going to go to gamma. What does gamma do? And guys, when you're making these, it's not about the numbers. It's not about what numbers I'm providing you. It's about what do they do. And once you know what these do, you can provide your own best settings to yourself, and you will know how to fully control your system and game how you should be able to game. So for the gamma, The gamma is 1.29, and that's because what gamma does is it increases the light, or increases the overall, yeah, it basically increases the light of your game. That's it. If I set the gamma down to 1, do you see how it gets darker there? There's more shadows and everything. But coming back at 1.29, it provides that extra little light that you would need if you were in a gunfight or a dark area or someone's camping in a corner or something. This will provide you that extra millisecond for you to win that gunfight there, which is perfect. Now, for the last one, which is digital vibrance here. Digital vibrance is basically controlling how much colors do you want in the game. That's it. That's basically it. If I went to digital vibrance of 0, it will leave my screen completely black and white. That should tell you something. If I went to digital vibrance as 100, it will leave my screen with a lot of colors. It's actually pretty beautiful now. Before the update, it was almost impossible to play on 100, but now with the update, I suggest sticking between 75% digital vibrance to 100% digital vibrance, and just picking what you would prefer within that area there. Now, if you're on AMD, you would do this through hue and saturation and gamma. It's the same thing. You would just mix them until you find what you like in your colors, and that's it. That's how you would find the best color setting. So let me show you guys the difference between these and basically normal settings. So this is with the color settings right now, as you can see here. So let's restore to default here. That's without it. That's how the game looks without it, guys. It looks like it has a layer of gray over the game here. So let's slowly add back the colors here. So I'm going to add some contrast. I'm going to add 80 contrast, and you see how that adds a little bit of shadow there, which is perfect. And then the gamma is really going to make it pop. Look how it's making those little colors that you would need to detect the enemy pop up there. So that is going to be perfectly fine right there. And then we have the digital vibrance, the secret sauce, the Mamba, the goat. Bang. And that's what you need to make your game look amazing. Now, we talked a little bit about performance, so I'm going to give you guys a little performance tips here. So for the manage 3D settings, what you're going to do is go to texture filter quality. You're going to set that to high. You're going to go to, where is it? Power management mode. You're going to set this to max performance here. And then for threaded optimization, you want to make sure that's on for Warzone. And then texture filtering, tri-linear optimization, you want to make sure that one's on. You want to make sure G-Sync's off so you don't increase your input delay, guys. Input delay is actually even more important than FPS itself. So if you decrease your input delay and you have mid-tier FPS, you would actually have a better time than having high-tier FPS with really bad input delay. So let's get into the game and the in-game settings so we can show you guys and explain to you guys what each setting does and what each setting is. So the first thing that we're going to go to is options, and we're still in Windows mode. We're going to go to full screen here. Boom. That's actually the first thing. Right there, you would always want to put your display mode in full screen mode, guys. It does make a difference. Even if you're on full screen borderless, I know you don't like tabbing out, you don't like that black screen before you could do stuff, but it makes a tremendous amount of difference in your input delay if you're trying to win gunfights on full screen versus full screen borderless. Full screen allows Windows to prioritize your game and get it taken care of first. Full screen borderless it takes away that rights and it gives those resources to everything else on Windows. So you want to make sure you're on full screen. That way you could get what you deserve here. And you want to make sure your render resolution matches your monitor, of course. So my monitor is a 1440p monitor, so this is 1440p. Dynamic resolution, you would leave this alone. Custom frame rate, this is a huge one, boys. So a lot of people like running unlimited, and nobody really tells you guys why you should run a custom frame rate. So I'm going to explain it today. The reason why you should run custom frame rates is because, one, it's going to prevent your GPU from overheating or your system from overheating just by loading menu frames. So you guys ever get into a game and after a couple of games you notice that your system's not running at the same FPS? That's because it's getting too hot and it's actually throttling itself because it's trying to load up 1,000 menu frames instead of helping you guys in game. So you want to make sure your system's extremely limited during menu, just to make sure you guys get the most performance while you're in a gunfight there. The second reason why you want to uncap frames is because that 400, 800 FPS is not going to be good if your GPU's still running at 100% here. If your GPU's running at 100%, guys, or 98%, anything above 95%, guys, that means that you are GPU bounded and your GPU is actually making more input delay. And it sounds pretty crazy, but that is how it is. And you're probably asking why. The reason why your GPU is making more input delay is, let's say we're drawing this, right? We're drawing a graph right here. This is your CPU. I'm just going to name it a C. This is your GPU, which is a G. Your CPU sends 0 and 1s to your GPU, right? In Warzone, you're not really CPU limited a lot. You're really GPU limited a lot. So basically, your CPU is sending more and more and more and more to render, and it's filling up this thing called a render queue. Now, when this thing's filled up and your GPU can't take it, this gets massive input delay. Your game's going to feel extremely bad because your GPU is not syncing up and making sure everything gets done in a timely manner. You're going to get those frames, but you're not going to get it done where you can actually benefit from it input wise. So that's the reason why you have to cap your frames, just to make sure your GPU is not doing too much work and to make sure it's staying cool within that, because this also heats up your GPU because it's just trying to catch up there. Now, the real way that you have to limit, I'm telling you guys all the sauce today. Just make sure you share with a friend that needs it. But basically, I'm gonna show you guys the sauce. Watch this. So when you want to actually limit your FPS, what I usually do is use MSI Afterburner. So you can download this from MSIAfterburner.com, and you want to download the Riva Tuner extension. And then with this extension, all you have to do is click this frame rate limit, which is going to be 240, which is going to match your monitor's hertz. So mine is 240, so I'm going to put 240 here, and that is it. I just limited my frames like that. And that is actually better than limiting your frames in-game because it's more consistent, and the in-game frame rate limit is not as consistent. So that is actually the proper way to limit your frames, guys. So make sure you share that with a friend, because I see a lot of people doing that mistake, and they don't understand that they could just limit it with the RT like Riva Tuner and make sure that they're good and they're getting less input delay. But let's continue here. Let's move on to NVIDIA highlights. Do you clip your highlights with your NVIDIA GeForce? If you don't, please turn this off. This causes massive input delay. Even if you're clipping, it is beneficial, but know you're getting input delay on the back end. Anything that adds or needs resources for your GPU adds input delay. So you got to make sure that you're reducing that amount of input delay that you're adding on every time you open up a program for this system. And that's the key to getting more frames in general, guys. You want to make sure your game is running as smooth as butter. You don't want everything else running. We don't need Windows 10 doing this, doing that. We just want a game, guys. So that's how you would do that. NVIDIA Reflex is a whole different story. Now, nobody, and I mean nobody, ever explains these three settings here. So I'm gonna show you guys the sauce. Basically, NVIDIA Reflex disabled. What does that mean? That means that your GPU and your CPU in a GPU bounded situation is communicating like this. They don't like it. Your CPU is trying to give it all the love and your GPU is just not taking it. It can't handle it. And this is what causes a lot of input delay as well. So NVIDIA released NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency to combat that. So when you're on Reflex Low Latency enabled, that provides you the makeup in latency for GPU bounded situation. It is write that down. Literally write that down. Tell that to your friend. They're gonna be like, how do you know this? Write that down, guys. I'm telling you. Now, NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency boost or on. What does that mean? NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency Boost or On is for CPU bounded situations. So it makes sure that your GPU is working a little bit harder just to keep up, and have your CPU make sure that it's like sending out as much frames like as possible, right? So both of these, which is ironic, this is going to sound pretty weird, both of these actually causes slight frame dips, but it decreases your overall input latency or your input delay, which is kind of ironic, but it actually makes sense. So you definitely want to be running one or the other depending on your system. So hey Kirneill, how would I tell if I'm GPU or CPU bounded? So I'm gonna show you guys in a game real quick how you would tell that, but first let me switch it over to CPU bounded. Now, well, actually, first, let me explain why you shouldn't use Enabled plus Boost if you're not CPU bounded. The reason why you would not use Enabled plus Boost if you're not CPU bounded is because your GPU is doing more work. And it's doing more work for no reason. So what happens when it's doing more work for no reason? That means that it's heating up. It's heating up just like the main menu frames. And that is when you get your dev ears. That is when you get your PC crashes. That is when you get your overheating. Now it's starting to make sense, guys. This is what causes 90% of your problems, and nobody has explained this to you guys. So I'm making sure that you guys have this information so you guys could educate other gamers for free and make sure that's good there. So make sure that you just leave this on enabled. You don't need the boost. The boost is not going to improve your FPS at all. It's barely going to make a difference in input delay at all, and it's actually going to make decrease your FPS, I believe, compared to NVIDIA Reflex enabled. So let's continue to quality while we're searching for a game here. Streaming quality. Streaming quality is for basically how much do you want to render of the map. Now, if you want to render a small portion of the map because you are a close range player, let's say you play usually multiplayer, then you should use streaming quality low, and that would be perfectly fine, because to you, it's about the highest FPS and the lowest input latency possible. Now, if you're a Warzone player and you have to play this big map, and you need to see a guy halfway across the map, you definitely want to have streaming quality normal, because normal is going to allow you to be able to obtain the amount of depth that you need to snipe somebody across the map there. So that is perfect. So that's how the streaming quality works. Now, texture resolution, this is all personal preference. Usually professional players play at very low for that FPS difference, but remember when I said you want to put as little resources on your GPU as possible. You don't want to overstress it. That's why professional players play on low, because they don't want to overstress their system. They want to have that low input latency. So that's why they play on low instead of high, because that actually gives them a competitive advantage. Texture, filter, Anatropic, I leave this at high because this is the only setting that I found that made a huge difference to my game. Every other setting on here really doesn't make a visual difference unless it's super intensive like texture resolution. So if you want a good looking game and you want a really good FPS, you definitely want texture anatropic resolution on high here. And we're gonna actually test the FPS, guys. Right now I'm getting around 240 FPS in Caldera. Let me know down below what kind of FPS that you guys get. I'll be interested to see that. Let me know what CPU and GPU do you have, so we can actually compare FPS here. That would be actually fun. So let's see what is next. So we went through texture anatropic. Particle quality, I put that on low. It really doesn't make that much of a visual difference. If you like particle quality and that makes a visual difference for you, then go ahead and put it on. That is perfectly fine. Bullet impact spray, I disable that because that doesn't make a big virtual visual difference. Tessellation, I disable that because that also doesn't make a big difference. So you'll notice that I disable most of these because they don't make a huge difference to my game. You could still play the game and be a really good player without 99% of that stuff, and that's what we encourage, like, in general, because that's going to make you better, and it's also going to give you the advantage over your competitors that's playing on 4K high settings, not knowing that they could play on low with that same PC, and they can actually have the advantage over you. So take your advantage and run here. DLSS you can use usually quality, and that's actually pretty good, or just disable it in general if you want that visual impact. The problem I have with DLSS is it's a little bit blurry, so I don't like using it much, so I would leave that disabled if I was me. But I have a 3090 Ti, of course I'm leaving it disabled. If you have like a really low card, definitely include DLSS. It's gonna rock your world. Anti-aliasing, now this is how this works, guys. Nobody explains this. If anti-aliasing is SMAA 1 or higher, then you should not have filmic strength on. If SMAA is disabled, then filmic strength should be 100, guys. And that's how it's supposed to work there. So that's going to make your game look really good, even if you don't have anti-aliasing on. That's a little tip that I learned, like, from the professional players there. Now let's keep let's keep going here. So what's next? Boom, 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 boom. We did SMA, we did filmic strength. Let's do depth of field. I don't personally like that because it makes your aim a little inconsistent. It makes your field of view what you're used to looking at really inconsistent here. Motion blur, we already know to disable that. Please disable that, guys. Shadow map resolution, I will not enable, like, or higher this up because this is actually intensive on both your CPU and your GPU here. So if you want a low input delay in general, you want low shadows in general, unless you absolutely have to have it. Now, cache spot shadows and cache sun shadows, those are definitely going to be enabled, guys. So basically you always want to check to see if those are enabled, because those are going to save you frames here. And I'm going to just walk around the map here and you guys let me know what you think. Let me know what you think in the comments. Does it look good? How are the frames here? Like, what would you do with this PC if you had it, to be honest? Now let me show you guys the rest of it, and then I'll show you guys what a GPU intensive situation is and a CPU intensive situation or bottleneck situation is. So, oh no, he killed me, god dang it. So now with particle lighting, it's the same thing. If you need it, you need it. If you don't, you don't. I personally don't, so we leave it low here, and a lot of professional players leave this low as well. Direct ray tracing, ambient occlusion, and SSR all disabled because they don't really make a huge difference in terms of your, well, they make a huge difference, but too much of a big impact on your FPS. We're trying to win gunfights here, guys. We're trying to get a good looking game, but I would just say if you're looking for a good looking game, switch over to a 1440p monitor and you'll get that. If you are just looking for like a really good looking game, you don't care about FPS, then that's okay. This video might not be for you, but we're looking for all the edges, guys, and I'm going to give that to you guys today. So we just went through everything in regards to all the in-game settings there, so that's going to be perfectly fine. Oh, and make sure your audio is boost high or boost or midnight mode. Those modes are actually like some of the best modes that you could get for your audio here. I just gotta kill this guy real quick. Hold on, emoji. Wait, what? Is that a dead body? Oh, there he is. We got him, boys. We got him. So once we fly out, I'm going to show you guys what it is here. So I'm going to fly out. You see me in the sky. Look at the GPU on the GPU line, the GPU percentage versus my CPU percentage. My GPU percentage is 98%. My CPU percentage is 30%. Now, this means that my GPU, because it's over 95%, remember, it is my bottleneck right now. So my main bottleneck, if I wanted to increase my frames, I would have to lower the demand on my GPU to do that, because my CPU, it's doing its work. It's taking its time. It's doing its work. I'm still getting 240 FPS, but my CPU is waiting for my GPU to catch up. So that's how you would tell a GPU bounded situation, and that's when you would use NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency enabled, because this is how 99% of the game is, guys. Your GPU is going to be at 90%. Your CPU is not going to be using as much, especially if you're on 1440p, and you're going to be having a ton of input delay. So to prevent that, you want to make sure and use NVIDIA Reflex low latency enabled, not enabled plus boost. Now let's see if we could get the GPU to calm down a little. So it's not under 95, but it's getting pretty close. You guys see what happens when it hits like a lower rendered state. This is how I know 100% or bottleneck is 100% the GPU, because look how we're on 300 FPS now, because the GPU is starting to catch up. It's starting to catch up, and now the GPU's percentage went lower. That's how you know you're getting into a CPU bounded state. But it's not fully, it's just capped by the FPS here. But that's how you would know, guys. If your GPU is at 98%, like all day on the game, which 99% of users are, you want to make sure that you have NVIDIA Reflex enabled. If your CPU is the one bottlenecking you, and that's the one at 98%, you want to make sure that you have NVIDIA Reflex enabled plus boost. And that is it, guys. You know how to use those settings. You never have to worry about it again. You never have to guess again. That's it. You got it. That's all there is for those settings there. So that's going to be perfectly fine right there. And yeah, guys, so I hope you enjoyed that little spiel right there. So just remember to cap your FPS with Riva Tuner instead of the in-game FPS if you want really, really low input latency or input delay. And anytime you guys have questions, you guys can just contact me, or you guys can follow me on Twitter at Kirneill, Kirneill, and I will definitely answer your questions directly there. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know down in the comments, what did you learn new today in this video and how we could improve it. But if you need any kind of professional assistance in increasing or boosting your FPS, you can always go to sensequality.com. But I love providing these little details for you guys, so you guys can have this for free, even if you can't go to the website. So basically, you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the season of Warzone here. Peace.